Hello, my name is Jeff Badnock. I'm the director of the city's redevelopment agency. Today we're going to be talking about the California Street Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge Project. This bridge project has been in the planning stages for several years, and only now, recently, are we at a point where we're going to be requiring citizens to help us with the planning of this project. The California Street Bridge was at one time a very important link for the city's bicycle and pedestrian users. Formerly a vehicular bridge, when it became unsafe for that purpose, it was used successfully for many years as a way for bicyclists and pedestrians to cross the Clark Fork River. In the mid-'80s, it was no longer considered safe and the superstructure was torn down, leaving the piers that you see behind me in the river. Under the current federal transportation funding programs, there is a smaller program called the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, or CMAQ. The CMAQ program is designed to help communities solve transportation problems to encourage citizens to use alternative forms of transportation, among other things, bicycles and walking. The California Street Footbridge is a project that's being funded under the CMAQ program. Right now, we're at the point in the development of this project where we're investigating the project, looking at some of the problems that we're going to be encountering in trying to replace the California Street Bridge, and we're also considering environmental questions. Among the issues that we have to address is public involvement, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. To meet the requirements of the federal funding under the CMAQ program, this project must meet the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. As part of the requirements of that act, we must examine carefully the impacts that this project will have on the environment. We must consult with the people in the community to understand their perceptions, desires, and needs as a part of this project as well. And we'll be talking about those issues in just a few minutes. Missoula has long been a community that enjoys bicycling and walking as forms of both commuting and as recreation. In our non-motorized transportation plan, the California Street Bridge was identified as a gap in the local transportation network. This project will put that bridge back and allow Missoula citizens access to their community in new and dynamic ways. It will connect neighborhoods with other neighborhoods. It will connect neighborhoods with the downtown. It will connect neighborhoods and outlying areas with the university. It will connect the community with the surrounding trails and recreational lands around the community. It will also connect people from their homes to where they work, where they shop, and where they go to school. The California Street Bridge needs your attention right now in terms of providing the engineers and the people studying this project the information about the community's needs and desires. And now to talk with you a little bit about the needs the project has, a little bit about some of the details included in the project, I'd like to introduce you to Mike Worrell of Carter & Burgess Engineering. Carter & Burgess Engineering has been hired by the city to provide engineering services and environmental analysis as well as the public involvement for this project.
The California Street Bridge was originally constructed in 1906. It was very similar to many other bridges that were constructed during the same period. It was very similar to the Van Buren Street Bridge, which is now used for pedestrians and bicycle use. In 1908, the California Street Bridge withstood the floods that wiped out many other bridges across the Clark Fork, notably the Higgins Avenue Bridge. And the California Street Bridge served as a critical link during the period that it took to reconstruct the Higgins Avenue Bridge. Part of our work was to evaluate the existing piers that were built originally in 1906 to determine whether those could be used during the for the new bridge for the next 100 years, however long the new bridge is expected to be here. The original piers, while they lasted and served well for 80 years, needed to be evaluated to determine whether they were suitable for that use. This is one of the piers that is currently on the north shore of the Clark Fork, and it's similar to the other piers in the river and on the other side that were constructed in 1906 with the original structure. It was hoped that we could reuse these piers for the new bridge, and so what we did to evaluate the condition of these was to have a drilling conducted of these. A boring was taken down through the center of these columns, and what was found that these steel encased concrete columns are founded on wooden piles that were driven down and support the loads of the bridge. What we found was these old wooden piles that these concrete piers sit on is rotted and degraded from the years. The first several feet were totally missing, and so we determined that the existing piers were not suitable for the construction of a new bridge. The study process includes several steps. The first would be to define the purpose and need, or why we're doing the project. The second, to define the alternatives that are considered for the project. 3, to assess the impacts of those alternatives. 4, to prepare an environmental document that conforms, that meets the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. 5, to obtain agency and public comment. And 6, select a preferred alternative for implementation. To accomplish the process, we've devised several ways that the public can get involved and we can obtain their input into it. The first is a series of public workshops. We've already held 2 of those workshops, and there'll be another one here later this summer. What places do you commonly need to get to on the south side of the river? What location, what destinations?
I would love to get across to the 4G computer where I am. Or a computer. Like get out of Saudi Mall.
Mall. Good. So there's a number of locations we need to be able to get access to.
My main concern is the building, the city building an attractive nuisance when they build that bridge, because we've had little kids and big kids and grown men dive off the old county bridge when it was there.
We've developed a mailing list whereby we distribute a newsletter updating people in the project area or interested people on the status of the study, things we've learned, issues that have been raised, and comments we've received. There'll be a public hearing on the project later this summer. You can also give us your input by calling us or sending us letters, and you can contact either myself at Carter and Burgess, 113 West Front Street, number 103 in Missoula at 59802. Our phone number is 721-1471, or you can contact the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, Carrie Lee Nelson, at 123 West Spruce Street in Missoula at 59802. The phone number is 523-4608. Thus far in the project, we've identified a number of different issues, and to summarize the issues that we've heard, one is that a new bridge in the area will change the visual character. It'll be a new bridge crossing over the river. The second is that by having a trail and a bridge in the area, there'll be more public into using an area that wasn't previously used heavily by the public before. The potential for wetlands impacts in the river. There's wetlands along the shores of the river and the islands, and the potential for impacts there. There's landowner concerns about associated with bringing more people into the area, and their concerns have to do with theft and vandalism and privacy. There is a park adjacent to the California Street Bridge, a Lions Club Park, and how does that bridge interact with that park, and what effects does it have on its use? There's been concerns voiced along the river corridor just about the number of bridges crossing the river, and that people feel like the number of bridges crossing the river may detract from the visual aspects of the river corridor. And potential impacts to the island. There's an island located at California Street that will ultimately need construction of a pier, and what are the impacts to the island as a result. We have the column of others. If you have any other issues that we need to consider in all this is just a brief summary. Please feel free to contact us. Another part of our work was to evaluate the adequacy of the piers that were from the old bridge that was installed in 1906. As we talked about in the field, we performed drilling of those piers to assess their condition and found that they were not suitable for use in a new bridge. Also included in that was a structural evaluation, a hydraulic analysis, and analysis of scour to determine how susceptible those existing piers would be to erosion during flood events. Also a part of the study is to prepare a NEPA document. As I mentioned before, the NEPA document meets the requirements to qualify for federal funding. Basically, an environmental document has to be completed to assess all of the environmental impacts of a project before it can be eligible for federal funding. And to review those real briefly, what's contained in a NEPA document is a documentation of what the purpose and need of the project is, a description of the alternatives that were considered, and those will typically always include the no-build and the build alternative, and then an evaluation of different areas of the environment and what the impacts are. Land use impacts, socioeconomic impacts, transportation, right-of-way impacts, farmland impacts, air quality impacts, noise, water resources, wetlands, wildlife, and fisheries, floodplain impacts, impacts to threatened and endangered species, impacts to parks and recreation, cultural resources, including both historical and archaeological resources, impacts to hazardous materials that may be present in the project area, visual impacts, and impacts of construction such as noise, traffic delays, access, and etc. So that summarizes all of the areas of the environment that are evaluated in an environmental document. The California Street Bridge was identified in the non-motorized transportation plan that Missoula developed a couple years ago. The transportation plan identified a system of both trails or off-street facilities and on-street facilities to integrate non-motorized transportation such as pedestrians and bicyclists into the transportation network. The existing trails are shown in green, squares, and it may be a little bit hard to read, but it involves the trail system that is the riverfront trail system in the McCormick and Caras Parks and South Shore Park areas. Proposed is an extension of those river trails along both sides, and the proposed trails are shown in red. The California Street connection is shown here. Also included in the plan was a system of on-street facilities on both the primary streets, shown in orange, and the secondary streets, shown in yellow. Once it was determined that we couldn't use the piers, then we took a step back to really evaluate whether the California Street was the ideal location for integrating into the non-motorized transportation system. We considered 4 different sites. One, a pedestrian bridge adjacent to the bridge at Russell Street, a bridge at California Street, a bridge at the end of Burton Street that would align opposite of the old Champion Mill site, and then another one at the end of Scott Street, also tying into the area on the south side, on the Champion Mill site on the south side of the river. In considering all of those alternatives, we developed a set of evaluation criteria to evaluate each one of these alternatives with regards to one another. I'm going to describe real briefly. I'm not going to be able to describe the entire evaluation. A copy of this was contained in the second newsletter that was distributed. If you'd like a copy of this evaluation matrix, please contact us and we'll send you a copy of that newsletter. But the criteria that was evaluated included the conformity with the non-motorized transportation plan, as I described. It included transportation, which involved how well the bridge location served different neighborhoods for people trying to achieve major destinations such as downtown or the university, and whether it was a direct route for those neighborhoods, the people living in those neighborhoods, to reach those major destinations. We considered the accessibility and connectivity to the rest of the non-motorized travel network and how well it connects both to the trail network, but the secondary on-street network and the primary street network. Also, we considered the impacts of the river, since the different locations would involve different types of pier construction, either on islands or in the river. We looked at what was involved for structural requirements, how long would the bridge have to be, and what the construction cost of each alternative would be. We considered how much right-of-way would need to be acquired for each of the alternatives, and we also considered the visual and aesthetic quality of each of the locations. As a result of that evaluation, the project team for the project, in considering the public involvement gathered from the second newsletter and the second public workshop, we've determined that the California Street does fit the best. We're also considering different types of bridges. We'd like to hear your input as to the type of bridge you'd like to see. There are several types of bridges that we've identified here that we can consider, starting with a cable stayed bridge. Basically, a center tower would be constructed whereby the bridge would be suspended from cables strung to that center tower. Another one to consider is the bowstring arch, whereby steel arches would be constructed, and then the bridge deck surface hung from those steel arches above the bridge deck. We can consider the use of a more conventional continuous truss that would be constructed of steel. Also, another more conventional simple bridge would be a steel girder bridge, and then another would be a suspension bridge whereby towers would be constructed above the level of the bridge and a cable suspended where the bridge deck itself would be hung from. And again, we'd like to hear your input on it, both on the bridge type but also on the bridge materials. We have the opportunity of constructing a surface or a bridge deck out of different types of materials such as wood or concrete or other types of materials, and we'd like to hear your input on those different types of construction as well. All right, thanks for watching. The whole point of this video was to reach a greater part of the community that might not otherwise participate in the project, and may make it easier for people to involve their comments into the project. If you have comments or issues you feel need to be considered, please contact me, Mike Worrell, at Carter & Burgess. My phone number is 721-1471. Or you can contact Carrie Lee Nelson at the Redevelopment Agency. Her number is 523-4664.